All right, today we're going to tackle a really complex topic, the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. But we're going to look at it in a different way. Think of it like a stone thrown into a pond. There's the initial splash, but then the ripples spread out, wider and wider. That's exactly what we're going to do here. We'll start at the epicenter, the front lines, and then follow those ripples to see just how far this conflict reaches. So, let's dive in.
But first, something we absolutely have to keep in mind. This isn't something we're looking back on from a history book. Nope, the war is happening right now. Every single day. The consequences are unfolding as we speak, which makes it so important to understand all the moving parts.
Okay, so let's begin right at the center of it all, that first ripple. What's the situation actually like on the ground in Ukraine?
Well, the main thing to understand is that the fighting is still very much active and it's happening all over the country. It's not just one single front line. We're talking about a really widespread conflict that's hitting many different cities. And that's a huge deal, because it means millions of people are affected, even if they're nowhere near what you might think of as the main battle.
And all of that fighting, well, that creates our second ripple, the devastating human cost. It's easy to get lost in the news reports and the military jargon, but we have to remember, behind all of that are real people. Millions of them whose lives have been completely turned upside down. One of the biggest, most heartbreaking outcomes of this war is that so many people have had to flee. We hear the word refugee a lot, but let's just pause and think about what that really means. It means you've been forced to leave everything behind, your home, your job, your community, to escape the violence. It's not a choice. It's about survival, plain and simple.
And you can see how it's all connected, right? It's like a domino effect. When buildings and roads are destroyed, it's not just about losing property. It's about entire communities being torn apart. You can't go to work, you can't go to the store, you can't live a normal life. That's what pushes people to leave, what turns them into refugees.
Okay, so that leads us to our third ripple. How has the rest of the world reacted? A conflict this big obviously couldn't be ignored, so what did the international community actually do? One of the first major diplomatic moves came from the United Nations. Now, the UN is basically the world's main stage for international teamwork, right? So when they call for a ceasefire, it's a huge deal. It's the world speaking with one voice, a formal plea to stop the fighting. And that puts a ton of diplomatic pressure on everyone involved.
But beyond that, the global response really went down two main paths at the same time. On one hand, you have pressure. Countries started imposing sanctions on Russia, basically economic penalties aimed at making it harder for them to fund the war. And then on the other hand, you have support. A huge effort to get humanitarian aid, food, medicine, shelter to the people who desperately need it.
This brings us to that final, widest ripple, the one that touches pretty much everyone on the planet, the economy. It's kind of crazy how a conflict in one part of the world can end up affecting your wallet. But that's exactly what's happened. The reason is pretty simple, really. Our world is just so interconnected these days. When a region that exports a lot of key things, like energy and grain, is disrupted, well, that sends shockwaves everywhere. It messes with supply chains and drives up prices for things, even thousands of miles away. So when you hear about the global economy being impacted, what does that actually mean for you personally? Well, it hits you at the gas pump. It hits you at the grocery store. The price of fuel for your car, the cost of heating your home, even the price of a loaf of bread. It's all connected back to what's happening in that one region. So we've looked at the conflict, the human cost, the global reaction, and the economic fallout. The big question left is, where do we go from here? What's the way out of this? That brings us to the search for peace. So how do you even begin to build peace? Well, it's a process. Step one is just getting both sides to agree that a resolution is needed. Once you have that, the really critical part begins, direct talks or negotiation. You have to get people in a room talking to each other. That communication is the absolute foundation for reaching the end goal, which is, of course, a real, lasting peace. And that leaves us with the million-dollar question, doesn't it? On paper, the path to peace seems straightforward. You just negotiate. But when you factor in the reality of the fighting, the immense human suffering, and all the complicated global politics involved, you have to ask, just how hard is that path going to be? The goal might be simple, but the journey there, well, that's one of the biggest challenges we face today.